Thank you, sir. Mr. Vice Chair, members, presenting AB 571. California, pardon me, is one of the very few states to have state campaign contribution limits, but no local contribution limits. What that means is that unless a local government adopts its own campaign contribution limits, literally any amount can be contributed directly to a candidate for local office. We've seen examples of city council members receiving direct contributions from a single donor that are higher than the average Californian's annual salary, even single contributions as high as $100,000. Contributions of this magnitude undermine public trust in democracy. This bill creates a reasonable default contribution limit to stop excessive campaign contributions for city and county races while also respecting local control. AB 571 establishes default campaign contribution limits of $4,700 at the local level for cities and counties that have not adopted their own contribution limits. This is the exact same amount as the state individual contribution limits we are bound by in the State Assembly and Senate. It is important to stress that AB 571 maintains complete local control at any point, even 20 years from now. A local jurisdiction can opt out by enacting its own contribution limits, whether lower or higher than the default. With me today is Nicholas Heidorn with California Common Cause and Dora Rose with the League of Women Voters to offer additional comments and support.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Nicholas Heidorn representing California Common Cause in strong support of AB 571, which we believe will help secure the integrity of California's city and county elections. Under current law, the default is that there are no campaign contribution limits at the local level, but that local governments may enact contributions limits if they wish. This bill merely shifts that presumption so that the default is that there are local campaign contribution limits limited to $4,700, the same as the state, and would increase with inflation along with the state limits. But local governments, crucially, still retain the power to enact their own limits, whether they be lower or even higher than that default. Presently, the vast majority of local jurisdictions in California have no contribution limits. In 2016, California Common Cause did a study finding about a quarter of cities and counties had adopted contribution limits. This is despite the fact that the voters have at least twice voted to establish state and local limits. It's simply a quirk of history that those limits, which were litigated on the state basis and were held in the courts, and the final initiative to create our state limits only did state limits. It's through that quirk of history that we've ended up with no contribution limits. Unlimited donations, Common Cause firmly believes, is a problem for a democracy. They open the door to corruption and pay to play, create the appearance of special interest control, which demoralizes our democracy, and help incumbents entrench themselves against competition. AB 571 addresses this problem inherent with a system of unlimited contribution limits by creating just a reasonable $4,700 default cap. In closing, I just want to mention California is one of only 4 states to have state contribution limits, but no local limits. We should not be an outlier when it comes to safeguarding the integrity of our local elections. For this reason, we strongly urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Comment?
Good morning, Senator Nielsen. Dora Rose, League of Women Voters of California. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. The League works every day to build voter engagement and the public's confidence in the democratic process, to combat the cynicism that's caused by the perception and sometimes the reality of politicians who might put the interests of the donor class ahead of the public interests. Money presents one of the greatest threats to representative democracy today. From our perspective, it distorts incentives, right? It makes the competition inequitable, and it drowns out the voices of ordinary voters. The vast majority of California's cities and counties, as you've heard, have no campaign contribution limits at all. As a result, local contributions are larger than the ones that state electeds are permitted to have. At times, local candidates rely on just a few large donors to fund their campaign, 1 or 2, to fund their entire campaign. It makes sense to establish this realistic default limit on local campaign contributions set at the same level as legislative campaigns have theirs set at. Jurisdictions that have adopted their own local contribution limits, as you've heard, wouldn't be impacted by the bill. Local governments would remain free to set a higher or a lower limit as they desire. So we believe that AB 571 curbs the influence of money in politics, and it strengthens representative democracy while simultaneously preserving local government's flexibility to set limits to suit their own communities and their communities' needs. So we urge its passage Thank you.